She was literally polling behind Marianne Williamson, who is like the crystal lady that says we need to spread love. Kamala Harris was
I
called
will
the
meet
cop.
you on that battlefield, and I will
Yeah.
win with love.
Yeah, that's Marianne Williamson. Kamala Harris was polling behind her.
Yeah.
She had to drop out, and then for some reason, I guess Joe Biden was like, listen, I think the only way we can win is if we have a colored person. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that? Okay, a woman of color on the ticket. And they said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, Kamala Harris, here we go. And now she might be the presidential candidate? Yeah, I'm saying it's looking pretty over for the DNC at this point.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
So that is just a taste of 19-year-old Chandler Crump. I call myself kind of a day trader on X. It's like I go through and I look at what accounts are maybe trending or growing or interest me. And I like to invite a lot of these people onto the podcast to amplify their voices if I think that they are worth it. And this kid is worth it. He's 19 years old. I'm going to read you his profile on X. 19-year-old Gen Z commentator, 5-time Billboard charting artist, freedom fighter, media personality, and he's followed by some really interesting people as well. That's also the way I sort of gauge whether or not I'm going to invite this person on. Chandler Crump is delightful, and you're going to hear more of him in a matter of moments. And you're going to be glad you did, because it may give you some hope that, the youth of America isn't as bad as we thought they were. In fact, in some ways, they're really, really cool. By the way, facing inflation, surging debt, and worldwide uncertainty, you are not alone. Central banks and many Americans are stockpiling gold. If you haven't thought about gold yet, now is the time. Trust Priority Gold to help you review your portfolio and diversify your savings with gold and silver. Text the word GOLDEN to 800-405-GOLD. For a free gold information guide on how to get started, text GOLDEN to 800-405-GOLD, G-O-L-D. Chandler, it's great to meet you in person. This is our first time talking. I want people to know that. And I've been following you on X. I think you have a really interesting story to tell and an interesting point of view. And those are the kinds of people I like to amplify on this show. So welcome.
I'm really happy to be here, and I really appreciate it.
So I'm like a day trader on X. I look for people who I think are on the rise. He's at Real C Crump, by the way, and you can see that in our lower thirds. A 19-year-old Gen Z commentator, 5-time Billboard charting artist, freedom fighter, and your pinned tweet I want to talk about first because it has to do with Trump. You say they slandered Trump. They quote unquote investigated Trump. They convicted Trump. Now they shot Trump. He still fights. We will win. What is it about Donald Trump that makes you a supporter?
It's his rebel spirit. If I got to be honest, Trump has been, I'd say, a part of my life for most of it now. Back in 2016, I was maybe around 11, maybe 12. And that was the first election I really witnessed and got to in some way be conscious of. And the very first thing I thought was, who is this Trump guy? He seems kind of crazy. The whole news media is like, oh, this guy is going to destroy the world. Or around that time, actually, they were saying, oh, he has no chance to win. And I was like, okay, I guess I don't have to worry about anything. But one thing I knew for certain is I didn't like Hillary. I remember her from a few years when I was younger about the whole Benghazi thing. I was like, that's crazy. But after Trump was elected, I was like, okay, wait. If the media said that this guy's insane, if a ton of people, including Republicans, said that this guy's insane, and they had all these people at the debate stage debating against him, and he had all these funny moments, how did he win the election? I started to do more research and realized that almost everything that they had said about Trump was wrong. It was lies. And everything that he wanted to do to make America great again were actually good things. He wasn't a racist. He literally wanted to make our country better. And I felt that I had been lied to by the mainstream media, lied to by basically every mainstream politician. And I just felt like it was the start of a rebellion in a way. And after seeing the amazing things he did for not only my community, but the country as a whole during his tenure in office, I decided to become a full-on supporter around 2017. And by 2018, I decided to get out there and speak about it publicly. And that's when I realized it gets even further than just what he does for the country. It's, there's a cultural divide of people that want to destroy this country, people that want to see us, fail. And I want to fight against people that want to see us fail.
That is a remarkable answer. And there's a lot there. First of all, when Benghazi happened and those hearings with Hillary Clinton, you had to be like 8 years old, 9 years old. I mean, that's crazy that you remember that and that you were turned off by that, as was I. I was never a Hillary fan, and I guess that makes me anti-woman, since they say the only reason she didn't win is because people didn't want to elect a woman. Totally not true.
It sure wasn't Pokemon Go to the polls, I'll say that much.
But I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
So you did your research, and you're not the first person that I've talked to. And in fact, we heard Amber Rose during the RNC last week talk about doing research, that her father challenged her. She said, Trump's a racist. And he said, no, he's not. Go do your research. And it changed her mind. So what kind of research did you do that sort of formulated your opinion?
Oh, man. I definitely say I was raised to be a researcher and a reader. I definitely wasn't raised to just follow what the herd and the sheep mentality sort of taught. So, watching how Trump managed the country in the beginning, first few months, I remember in his first couple of months in office, he campaigned upon, we're going to destroy ISIS. He dropped the mother of all bombs on ISIS within like weeks or a couple of months of getting into office. And that, if you had talked to anybody, including myself in 2016 and 17, what you thought the greatest threat was, your people that were a bit more tuned in, they'd say, oh, China, maybe Russia. But for your average person, a lot of people were saying these Islamic terrorist groups, because they were saying, oh, we're going to come to America, we're going to blow things up, we're going to have mass shootings. They had a lot of them around that time. And so people were really scared of them. You don't even mention them now because they were obliterated, gone. But on top of keeping our country safe from Islamic terrorism, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these other terrorist groups that barely exist anymore now, although they started to come back during the Biden administration. I mean, the economic amazing things he did for our country, and even for the Black community itself. Like, we saw the lowest Black unemployment. We saw record investment in HBCUs. We saw the beginning of opportunity zones and many things like that. There's a video that went viral a few years ago of me when I spoke at a walk away panel with Brandon Strzok, and it was the Black Americans town hall with a few other Black conservatives that speak about this country and about conservative ideals. And, it's for people that walk away, leave the Democrat Party, leave the liberal ideology. And on that panel, I mentioned that I had grown up in a community that had basically shut down after the Obama administration and the Obama economy had started because of the recession, obviously. And it was, as Trump described it, the slowest economic recovery in American history. There was a building that had started building a little bit before had began construction a little bit before the recession and had stopped. And it literally did not start building again until 2017 and later on into 2018, when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was finally signed into law by Trump. And we suddenly saw all these federal regulations. We saw the extreme taxes that were putting a chokehold on American business and the economy vanish. And all of a sudden there were new businesses, new restaurants. It's like my city had suddenly snapped back into place and it was growing again. And I finally had places to go that weren't just school and home. It was like the world had finally opened back up and things were finally starting to move again. And it was at that moment I realized that it really does matter who is in office, because they can make these landmark changes that will really drive not just your community, whether it be the Black community or where you grow up, not just your country, but the world forward.
All right. So I would imagine I've talked to a number of people of color, whether they're Hispanic like me or Black, who get absolutely hammered by the left for supporting Trump. There are all kinds of names that they come up with. Chandler, they come up with Uncle Tom. They Bill Maher says people are sucking up to him. I feel like that's so demeaning and so dismissive. What have you experienced?
Yeah, I've experienced a good amount. And Michele, I wanna get on you for something real quick. And this is not a dig at you, but it goes to show you how far this ideology has pushed itself. The term you used right there, quote unquote, people of color.
Yeah.
I actually take offense to that term because
Okay.
what do you do when you flip the term people of color? Colored people. It's like they're using the exact same terms from the past to describe us once again, when we actually all have our own ideologies, our own backgrounds, but really what truly unites all of us is that we are Americans. Now, if you
Yeah.
want to say African American, Black American, Latina American, or just Latina, sure, whatever you want to describe yourself. But I don't want people walking up to me and saying, well, hey, you're a person of color, right? You can maybe walk up to me and say, hey, well, you're a Black person, right? But I'll say, I'm a Black American, or straight up, I'm an American.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing there. People of
Thank
color.
you for, you know what? You've
Yeah.
kind of put me in my place on that. And I was just parroting what people say, and you're right.
No, I agree. I agree.
And by the way,
yeah,
bravo to you for saying Latina instead of Latinx, which has become vogue, which
Terrible.
as a daughter of a Hispanic man makes me sick. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So the terms are crazy, and the most insane thing is that it sometimes is your own people that call you these terms. Like, for instance, when I was in middle school and I had just started doing the political thing, and sometimes kids would be like, oh my gosh, my parents saw you on like some news site, or I saw you doing this. The favorite thing was, how do you reconcile supporting Trump while also being an African American person? Doesn't that make you like a bootlicker or some other things that, I'm not going to say on your podcast because I don't want you to get banned, but just insane things like just straight up slurs. And I'd be like, well, first of all, do you not realize that you're perpetuating the exact same racism you claim to protest against by asking me and saying, well, hey, you're Black, you can't support this candidate. In fact, 50 Cent, who's going really viral right now for basically coming out fully to support Trump, he used to date some woman. I'm forgetting what her name was. It was some lady. It was a white lady. And he dated her for a very short period of time. And then after they broke up, I think it was years later, and 50 Cent's now come out for Trump. It was in 2020 that she said, well, she said, quote unquote, I'm paraphrasing here, I had a conversation with him and I said, you do know that you're Black, right? You can't support him.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the most disgusting thing ever.
I think that was Chelsea Handler.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was the name. I thought that was the name. I didn't want to say it was the wrong one. I don't know.
No, of course you didn't. But I remember her saying that, and I thought to myself, she does know he has a brain of his own, doesn't she? And a mind of his own. I mean, her saying that it is as racist as anything I've heard.
It's the most ridiculous thing, and it's become so perpetuated within our society that it's not even considered wrong anymore, even though it is the exact same thing. Because if you rewind 150 years, they say, oh, you do know that you're Black, right? You're supposed to work on my plantation. You're not supposed to have your freedom. And now it's the exact same thing. It's what Candace Owens and many other people have been saying for a very long time. And I don't like to say it because it's kind of very worn out, but it literally is the Democrat/liberal plantation, where it's no longer enslaving your body, but it's enslaving your mind now. You're not allowed to be a free thinker. You're not allowed to think outside the confounds or outside the box that is your skin color. And that is everything I want to fight against. I want people to be free thinkers. I want it to not be about what skin color you are or who raised you or what you are as a person, but what you believe and what you want for yourself.
Right. It's about values. And I've always said that you tend to hang out with people who share your values. And it doesn't matter if they're gay, straight, Black, white, it doesn't matter, because what matters, as Martin Luther King once said, is the content of their character. And that has to do with values. And that's all I'm driven by, period, the end. I thought it was interesting, too, that Matt Walsh, on his X post, he's at Matt Walsh blog, I think, criticized Amber Rose for being on the stage the first night of the RNC because she spoke about, Trump, but she's also pro-choice. I happen to be pro-choice with exceptions. With certain caveats, but she is. And he called her a slut. And to me, I want an open tent. No, it doesn't mean we have to sacrifice our values. Like, if you tell me you're pro defund the police, I don't want you in my tent, because that goes so strongly against my value system and my principles. But we can have other conversations about other things that I think. You can be pro-choice and be a Republican. You can be promiscuous and be a Republican. I thought she spoke to a lot of people. What did you think?
Okay, this is I've been watching all of this. I will have to admit I did not watch Amber Rose's speech at the RNC. I was a little busy during that
It's
time. It was
okay.
very poor timing. But
It's okay.
I am aware of who Amber Rose is,
Yeah.
and this is an issue that has to be walked very carefully. Now, what I'll start by saying is that the Democrat Party has become so insane and so narrow-minded and narrow-valued that it is literally evicting people out of it by the dozens, by the herdfuls, which is hilarious to watch. The problem with that is, and I wouldn't even say it's necessarily a problem, but the consequence of this is that a lot more people are saying, well, hey, I want to be a Republican. Or sometimes they say they want to be a conservative. The most important thing to remember is that there is a difference between being a Republican and being a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people that I know would say Amber Rose cannot call herself a conservative. But I don't know any of them that would say she can't call herself a Republican.
Right.
I'd say she is well within her right to speak about Donald Trump, to support Donald Trump, to vote for Donald Trump and other Republican candidates. But when it comes to calling herself a conservative, there might be a bit more issues with this because the definition of a conservative comes from a lot of these traditional values that we want to uphold.
Right.
And if she doesn't match some of these traditional values, it's very clear that it's really difficult for her to justify calling herself a conservative and having other self-justified or self-declared conservatives respect that identity. So I understand, I hate to say it, I understand both sides of it. I think she's well within her right to call herself a Republican and maybe even have a slot to speak at the RNC. But I also understand those that would say, okay, listen, I'm maybe on a certain side of this quote unquote big tent, and I don't think I want to be in this tent anymore. I would recognize and respect people that say that. But I also recognize and respect people that are, like you mentioned, pro-choice or more promiscuous or doing other very crazy things that would now say, well, hey, listen, Biden's literally like collapsing as a human in front of us. Trump's the only person left. He rose his fist after getting shot. He looks like a strong presidential candidate. There is nothing wrong with every single person in America saying, hey, I want to vote for that guy, even if every single conservative or people that are even further along than conservatives that would look at this and say, hey, I don't know if I respect you or your ideals, we can all come together and say, hey, let's vote for Trump. That's the one uniting factor, I'd say. Or, Republicans in general.
At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle we hold sacred: free speech. Free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. But here we are in a digital age, and discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being muffled or overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of people feeling like they don't have a voice in the conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where wealth protection research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech. They are committed to giving a voice to those who have been silenced. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts, and these are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. It is a free report that highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free by texting the word IDEAS to 76626. That's IDEAS. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act right now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy now.
So when Barack Obama was elected, I looked at his skin color, looked at mine, I said, that's amazing. And then the years went by, and I looked at my community. There's this building I saw, and it started building, and then when like a year into Obama's election, it stopped. And then it never started building again until a year after Trump's election. He was inaugurated. The economy came back. That building started building again. And I noticed that my community started improving again. New buildings everywhere. And I realized something. I realized it matters who's in office.
So Chandler, you said that the Democrat Party is losing people by the herdful, I think you said. I love that. I love that visual. Why? What have they done? What have they done to close themselves off so much?
Oh my gosh, what haven't they done? Everything that they've been championing on the culture side, despite the fact that, in my opinion, they really were winning the culture war for a while, is really starting to bite them in the back. There was been so many huge things that came out, whether it's what was it? There was that transgender lady they invited to the White House that like took off her shirt and was just shaking herself around, and people were like, "Okay, wait a minute. The White House is supposed to be like a sacred place within our country, at least insofar as the political side of things, and we have people desecrating it." Or what is her name? Corinne Jean-Pierre, who's just an absolute failure of a press secretary, basically just stopped having hearings for a while. And then even when she did, she would just say, well, I'm not taking questions from you. Or the big man himself, 10% for the big guy, that is, who is struggling during interviews and is, not looking so hot on the debate stage and is now, facing a lot of questions. At the time of this recording, we have Nancy Pelosi and numerous other people coming out to say, hey, listen, Joe, I don't know if he can win, and who knows what's going to happen over the next few days insofar as if he stays as the candidate. And then the backup candidate they have, Kamala Harris. Need I remind you guys that in 2020, she was in last place among, 18 Democratic presidential candidates, 18, 14, some amount around that. It was record-breaking numbers of candidates. She was literally polling behind Marianne Williamson, who is like the crystal lady that says we need to spread love. Kamala Harris was called
I will
the
meet
cop.
you on that battlefield, and I will win with love.
Yeah, that's Marianne Williamson. Kamala Harris was polling behind her. Yeah. She had to drop out, and then for some reason, I guess Joe Biden was like, listen, I think the only way we can win is if we have a colored person. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that? Okay, a woman of color on the ticket. And they said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, Kamala Harris, here we go. And now she might be the presidential candidate? Yeah, I'm saying it's looking pretty over for the DNC at this point.
Is there a Democrat candidate out there? Maybe not this go round, not this November, but they're going to look long game now. They're going to start looking at 2028, and before we know it, we'll be there. Is there any Democrat candidate you see on the horizon, whether it's Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or any of these possibilities that speaks to you at all?
I think the number one thing that Democrats are going to be targeting after the Biden era is identity, which is really sad. They're not looking for the best candidate to operate the country. They're just looking for the best candidate that they think people are going to sit and say, yeah, I'm going to vote for that candidate. Because, first things first, it was Hillary Clinton. But even before that, it was Obama in 2008. A lot of people said, well, maybe he really only won the nomination because they said, it's time that we have a black president. And you know what? I'm not even going to say that it was a bad thing. I'd say maybe it was a good thing that we had a black president just to show that we could do it. The late, great Herman Cain said back in 2012, and I remember this, he said, you voted for Barack Obama to prove you're not racist. Now vote for me to prove you're not stupid. And unfortunately, he was not able to clinch the Republican nomination back then. But I'd say that the Democratic nomination process is going to really focus on what you support as insofar as your identity. So I'm thinking Pete Buttigieg might be a really high contender, crazily enough. Obviously, Kamala Harris looks like she's already going to clinch that top spot. But I think they're going to be looking younger, and they're going to be looking for people that have, skin tone, really. So I'm thinking, your AOCs, they're going to elevate those higher, maybe into cabinet positions, similar to what they did with Pete Buttigieg, to get even more, name recognition. But I think they might really look for maybe a black man for the next run. So maybe Cory Booker or Hakeem Jeffries. He's very popular now. I'm thinking they're really gonna go for the identity politics for the next few years, I think, and it could really pay off for them if they're able to really recapture culture. But I think that's all they're gonna care about.
And that's a shame. And you're right. I remember in one of my appearances on The View, it was pointed out to me, which we'll talk about another time, Chandler, because it was brutal. But they pointed out to me that Joe Biden had the most diverse cabinet in history. And I just wanted to say, and how is it helpful? What does that mean? Because a lot of these people have been incompetent.
Yes. 1,000%. And the craziest thing about it is that Joe Biden was just getting interviewed and he was talking about his Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. And he was sitting there and he was like, oh, I nominated my Secretary of the Defense, the black man. He couldn't remember his name. All he could say was the black man. And then for some reason he went further and he tried to remember the name. And instead of saying Lloyd Austin, he said Ketanji Brown, who is the black Supreme Court justice that he nominated supremely and exclusively for the purpose of her being a black woman. He said that during the campaign trail, and I sat there and I said, okay, are you serious? Because now it seems like no matter who you pick, it's not for what they studied or if they have a really good cases that they've done in the past or if they have a fantastic judicial career. No, it is all about the color of their skin and whether if they have an XX or an XY chromosome. Yeah. That is wrong. Yeah. And it cheapens the entire basis of who they are as a person down to just, are you black or not? Yeah. Whether it be Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin or Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who could be very good people at what they do, very good people at their job, whatever it may be, or they could be terrible. And now it doesn't matter. It is all about if they're black.
The identity politics have to end. They are so destructive in so many ways. And I sit here in Minnesota where I have a front row seat to the George Floyd riots, to all of that. And then, and those basically ruined downtown Minneapolis. Yeah. But then, and it was okay. Like the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota let it happen. But they're also letting happen these pro-Hamas, anti-Israeli protesters go out and say the most disgusting, disgraceful things. What do you make of the anti-Semitism we are seeing and have seen over the past several months in this country that really, it sickens me?
Yeah, the culture divide that we're facing in this country has become so insane. Obviously, we've been seeing a very strong divide between the so-called Palestinian people and the Jewish people or the Israeli people in this country for a very long time, and it has only come to a further hold now that things have become hot over there. I can say with one thing to be certain, I don't believe anything over there would have popped off if Trump were in office. Very similar to the Ukraine and Russia war. That would not have started if Trump were in office because he was a strong hand on the pulse. I'd say the only reason these things are starting to become violent now and this divide is starting to become so much more at the front of our culture is exclusively because Joe Biden is that weak of a leader and that weak of a president. And his so-called cabinet of, the most diverse cabinet ever is not able to keep this country from ripping itself to shreds. And so I'd say the anti-Semitism or the anti-Islam culture that is starting to spread on both sides, whichever side you're on, it's starting to hurt innocent people. There are hostages on both sides of the crisis. There are people getting killed on both sides of the crisis. Whether you believe that the Palestinians, they all need to be gone, or whether you believe the space needs to be divided equally, or whether you believe something on either side of that, it is immaterial to the fact that America is being dragged into something and Americans are dying because we cannot fix this culture that we have allowed to fester both over there and over here.
Hey, I've told you about my friends at besthotgrill.com who also make the best gas logs for your fireplace. Now is the time to prepare for the colder fall and winter seasons. With rising energy costs, you'll want to warm one room, not your entire home, with a blazing Rasmussen gas log fire. With the convenience and controllability of a natural gas or propane gas log set, you can reduce the time you use your furnace. How cool is that? No pun intended. Gas logs are also an excellent source of emergency heat to keep your family warm during worrisome power outages. I mean, that would stink if you couldn't get warm. Rasmussen gas logs also make your fireplace look great when it's not in use. If your room has a modern or contemporary design, check out Rasmussen's popular fireballs and firestones. Get a free personalized log set sizing recommendation and more information about USA-made Rasmussen gas logs and Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. USA-made Rasmussen gas logs and Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. Over there and over here, you said. And one of the things over here has been the border. And for years, Kamala Harris, the border czar, Secretary Mayorkas, Department of Homeland Security, and the president have looked us in the eyes and said the border is secure. The border is secure, and we're working to secure it even more. We know better. The gaslighting, and I know that term's being thrown around a lot lately, but it is appropriate. The don't believe what you're seeing, just believe what I'm telling you, because I'm in a position of authority. I'm an elected official. I'm in a position of power, and therefore I have trust. You have faith in me because you voted for me. But I see what's going on. No matter what you tell me you wish was the case, or you want me to believe is the case, I can see with my own eyes. And now we've had murders and rapes, and a 12-year-old girl in Houston tortured and murdered. I mean, it's sick. And is there crime committed by American citizens? Absolutely. Do we want to invite more crime from people who already broke the law by crossing into this country illegally? No. So I can pretty much guess where you stand on this. But how are your conversations going with people who want to say, and that an open border is empathetic?
I want to say, just look at Biden's answers about immigration and the border during the debate, and that'll tell you pretty much everything. People are starting to abandon the idea of open borders because they're starting to realize that this crime wave we're seeing in America and this fentanyl crisis we're seeing in America is in direct response to the fact that on January 20-something, 2021, our country lost its border. It lost its ability to selectively decide who does and does not get into this country, at least on the southern border. And when you're landing on a plane, oh my gosh, it's all so secure, which is almost an insult in comparison to the fact that you can just walk through a river in some areas of Texas or Arizona and California and New Mexico, and boom, you're in the country. Now, granted, we do have some border patrol and we do have some sort of security, but it has been kneecapped by the Biden administration. There have been people that have come forward about this. Look at these border patrol agency unions, which is a union of agents that border the patrol, or patrol the border, I should say.
Right.
And they've all come out to endorse Trump because they know for a fact that Trump is actually going to let them do their jobs. Mm-hmm. Each and every single one of these men and women that protect our southern border aren't just doing it for a paycheck. They're doing it to keep our country safe. And by extension, they're doing it to keep their own families safe. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden has made it so that their jobs are next to impossible to do and is literally handcuffing them from the ability to protect our nation and protect their own families, all for the guise of supporting what the DNC says is, like you mentioned, an empathetic border, which is the exact reason why I believe the Democratic Party is starting to lose its own footing on the issue, because people are seeing the effects of it firsthand. There are more and more people that say, oh yeah, my cousin's sister's boyfriend's dog sitter died from fentanyl. Which, I say it like that, it sounds comedic until you realize almost every single American can say something like, hey, I know somebody that knows somebody, or I know somebody directly, 1 or 2 degrees of connection, that has died to fentanyl, whether they were just taking, a party drug and it was laced with something, they were smoking weed or something, and then they lose their life tragically because fentanyl is that dangerous of a drug. And it comes up through Mexico, but comes directly from China, of which Joe Biden says, oh, he's going to be so tough on China. Yeah. They're being tough on us. We're dying. Yeah. And you're saying Trump is weak on China, weak on the border? Stop the cap.
And it's amazing too that this law that was proposed, that was put on the House floor about preventing illegal immigrants from voting, that 198 Democrats voted against it. And they like to say that, well, it's, that's xenophobic. Well, wait a minute. Let's just talk about voter ID for a minute, because I don't know about you, but when I get on an airplane, I've got to show an ID. When I buy cold medication, I have to show an ID. When I want to buy a bottle of wine, I've got to show an ID. There are plenty of places we all need to show an ID. And the most sacred thing that we possess in this country outside of our liberty is our ability to vote for whom we want to vote. So shouldn't that require an ID? This is not about taking away voters' rights. And of course, there's a part of the left that loves to say, Donald Trump's going to take away your right to vote, which is just, I don't know.
Yeah, the thing I've said since 2020, when this voter ID thing really took a hold, especially after the things that happened in the 2020 election, people are starting to say, okay, listen, what's going on with our elections? Why aren't we making it a federal requirement for people to have an ID to vote rather than just a state's issue? Because on this one, I believe it should be a federal level. We have a federal elections commissions, for God's sake. I
Correct.
think we should be able to federally, electorally decide who is voting via their ID. This isn't to restrict people's right to vote. It is to protect their right to
Correct.
vote. The number one thing to remember is that for every illegal immigrant or person that should not be voting that votes, that basically counteracts your vote. It makes your vote worth slightly less. Whether
Yes.
they're voting for your party or against your party, regardless of that, that is still one more person that is voting that should not be voting. And Democrats and liberals are always like, oh my gosh, it's such a small number. These are pulling from studies that are only estimates. It is impossible to truly know how
Right.
many illegal immigrants are actually voting, how many people that should not be voting are actually voting, especially when you consider how these voting processes were basically destroyed in November of 2020 with COVID and the amount of mail-in ballots that were just shot out all across the country that we just took back in and said, yep, that sounds good. Let's just count it and not worry about who's voting it. This is the real problem. And so,
Yeah.
no, voter ID is not disenfranchising people like the Democrats and liberals want to say. It is doing the opposite. It is protecting your ability to vote, and it is defending your vote from those that should not be doing it.
And by the way, the soft bigotry of low expectations to suggest that people who are low income or people, African Americans,
Yeah, that's my favorite.
whatever, that they can't get an ID. Give me a break. That I can't stand that. Last thing for you, because you're still 19, right?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So when I went to college, my parents had saved, and then I went to graduate school and I took out some loans to go to graduate school, which I paid them all back. And I knew when I signed that loan application that it was going to be my responsibility to pay them back. And it took me a while. Because I went to USC for grad school and that wasn't cheap. So it took me a while, but I did it. And my parents paid for 4 kids to go to college. And that wasn't easy for my parents, trust me. So this student loan forgiveness, for which Joe Biden has bragged that he's gotten around the Supreme Court to do, that KJP has said from the podium, people are struggling. They need a leg up. We want to help them out. Well, didn't they put themselves in that position? And by the way, there are millions of Americans who are struggling for a variety of reasons. So this to me is purchasing votes. What say you?
Every dime spent on student loan forgiveness could have gone to the VA, could have gone to funding some organization that finds homeless veterans on the streets addicted to drugs and addicted to alcohol and get them back on their feet. But instead, like you said, we are literally buying votes from the youngest people in this country that are like, oh, hey, free money. My student loans just got forgiven. I know I signed my name on the dotted line and I knew most of the time I knew good and well what I was doing. But yep, the money just pops right back into my account. That's not fair. But there is more nuance to this student loans issue than just, oh, well, these kids just signed up for it. They did sign up for it, but it's because we have a culture that is, encouraging it. They're saying the only path to success in this country
Right.
a lot of the times is going to college. And I'm not saying going to college is a bad thing. I think the real issue is the fact that these colleges are charging so much for something that is not worth it. You have to spend
Exactly.
4-6 years going
Yeah.
to this college, taking all these different classes, being taught by some liberal professor that probably has a rainbow flag in the classroom and has a defund the police sticker on a bumper sticker on his car that would curse you out if you showed up to your class in a MAGA hat. They hate everything about you. And you have to pay upwards of like $200,000-$300,000 for this class if you're getting a really high level degree, or even $50,000. No disrespect to you, Michelle, but I imagine when you went to college, it was not nearly that expensive.
No, it
The
wasn't.
Yeah, the economy in this country has gone in an insane direction recently, but in even more insane direction is colleges. They've
Yeah.
taken this advantage. They know that these students will just sign up for it, and it's like this will be a really Gen Z phrase for you. I don't know if you'll get it, but some of your younger viewers might. It's literally an infinite money glitch, literally, that they're signing these kids onto, and then basically for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years with interest, these kids are just throwing money at these colleges, throwing money at these banks. So no doubt the banks and the colleges are going to be, yeah, heck yeah, go ahead and give student loan forgiveness, because instead of the students paying us back, a couple $1,000s a month for the rest of their lives, how about the government just hands us money?
Meaning
Well,
the
let's
taxpayer.
think about it, though.
Meaning the taxpayer.
You cut out the middleman. I was going to have some whole eloquent way to say it. Where does the government get that money from? The taxpayer. Because the government doesn't make anything. The government takes from each and every one of us, giving our paychecks, buying things at the grocery store, trying to buy a house, or owning a house that's been in your family for decades, and all of a sudden they say, oh yeah, you've owned this house, that'll be $30,000 to us.
Yeah.
I don't have $30,000. Oh great, your house belongs to us now. Yeah, the government can do that. And guess where all that money gets to go? Ukraine, sometimes Israel, and then sometimes student loan forgiveness. All these different places, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it's true. I know a lot of people say to you, hey, maybe your taxes are going to go to streets, your taxes go to the military. Sometimes they do, and hopefully a good amount of them do. But sometimes that money goes to a student loan forgiveness, or if you're Dr. Fauci, that money goes to killing puppies for science. All sorts of insane things the government does with your paycheck.
One last break, and then I'm going to ask Chandler about being brave and doing good. Stay there. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing ShareRight, healthcare done the right way. At ShareRight, you're not just a number. You're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With ShareRight, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. ShareRight ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it. From routine checkups to unexpected emergencies, with ShareRight, your health care is our top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya, Tafoya, to learn more and see how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya. That's SHARERIGHT.org, shareright.org/Tafoya, Tafoya, for healthcare done the right way. All right, Chandler, you may or may not know that I end every show by saying, be brave, do good. That's kind of my little motto. What is the bravest thing you've ever done, do you think?
This is a really difficult question for me to answer because I don't consider what I'm doing brave necessarily. I've been doing politics I've been doing politics for 5 years now. I started when I was 14 years old. I was still in middle school, but I at no moment, I felt physical fear for myself. Like, I don't know if somebody's going to run up and hit me, but I've never been scared to speak my mind. And I think that's a blessing I get from God and from my parents. They raised me in this amazing way. But I'd say the brave thing really comes from the people that follow what I do, support what I do, but truly the people that say, I've heard you speak, I've heard your music, I've heard you on Newsmax or some other place, I've seen you on Jubilee, and they say, you inspired me to speak out myself. You inspired me to maybe do something small, like go around my community and, encourage people to vote. Or do something big, like make a large donation to a campaign, or straight up start doing politics themselves and speaking about these issues themselves within their community or online. I know a few people that have said, Chandler, I started doing this because I saw you. And I think that's where the real bravery is. I think the real bravery comes from the people that have something to lose.
Yeah, but you're encouraging them. And that, to me, yes. I think you have been brave. All right, on the Do Good channel, if you were to tell people, I always say do good in a very generic sense. And I it can be something as small, like you said, as hey, thanking the postal delivery guy or gal, or smiling at your grocery cashier, something that has a small little impact that could have a ripple effect. And it can be something massive, like endowing a scholarship, whatever. What would you like to encourage people in the way of doing good?
Volunteer for a local organization, a local nonprofit that is getting out there. I worked with Scott Pressler for a little while, who does these amazing large scale, or he did in the past, these amazing large scale trash cleanups, where you would go to downtown Baltimore, downtown Atlanta, all these other places, walk along the road and pick up garbage. because it shows to people that it doesn't matter whether you're a conservative or a liberal. It matters if you care about your community and you want to go out there and clean your community. I think that's good.
I think that is really good. I love that idea. Absolutely love it. Gosh, it's been so fun to talk to you, and we've let people know all the places that they can follow you. Is there anyone that you want to plug in particular?
I just want to say to check me out on Twitter or /X, Real C CRUMP. I know it's at the bottom, but just Real C CRUMP. Also check me out on Instagram, Chandler.CRUMP. And then please feel free to check out some of my music over on Apple Music and Spotify. We didn't get to touch on it much on this podcast, but I made a few political songs a few years ago, and some of them went kind of large scale, including the one called Let's Go Brandon. That was a really fun one I made with Bryson Gray.
We might have to incorporate that here as we say goodbye to the audience. We'll play a little bit of that. Definitely. Chandler, thank you so much. I hope we can do it again.
Let's go, Brandon. Hey, let's go, Brandon. Hey, let's go, Brandon. We know he capping. Patriots out in the street taking action, hunting us down for speaking the truth. Beat down the pedal to save all the youth. Media lying, ignore all the crying. They building back better, but only the Taliban. Pilots on strike, but to Joe it's irrelevant. Open the border, lose all the order. Divide us up so they know that we never win, but we're united. We here in the stadiums, everyone chanting it, seeing it slandering. Biden collapsing and Democrats stealing it. Hey, we look at Joe. Can we get a refund? How about some mean tweets? Joe is a crook and he knows how to deceive. FJB is the motto in these streets. Let's go, Brandon. Sing it with me. I keep a drum like I'm Nick Cannon. Hey, let's go, Brandon.